Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good blessings, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to 4D Trinity. This is my weekly live stream where we bridge fourth dimensional consciousness, that is the consciousness of the heart, the heaven on earth realization that is within all of us, through the unity of mind, through the unity of body with spirit. So thank you for joining me today. Today our topic is free will. Is free will really free? So we're going to get right into it, and of course we do have some reading to do. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm on an old phone. There is no electricity in my neighborhood, so this old phone tends to be a little glitchy, so I will do my best. If I move a lot, and I'm a talker when I'm a mover when I talk with my arms in my hands, so I will do my best to stay centered for you. So let's recap. We know these last several sessions since we've come back for the season, we've been talking about the Akashic records. We've been talking about the grid. We've been talking about how we are rerunning patterns of memory, patterns of the past that lay in the Akashic records. Now, the Akashic records is the collective subconscious. The grid matrix is the collective conscious. So in the Akashic is stored all of memory through all time, space, and dimensions from all beings since we have decided that time began. So all of our memories, all of the experiences we've had are cataloged by way of resonance there in the Akashic records. And we pull from those records. This is what we've been discovering in these last several shows. We pull from the Akashic records, right? Those past memories that we walk with, those karmas, those aspects that we're working out now in this lifetime. We pull from the Akashic records those memories, right? We extend the frequency of those records, of those memories, and we play those records, right? We broadcast them through our cells, through the atoms that make us up. And those records, that frequency that we play, broadcasts out to the atoms of the universe, exciting realities via the grid, which creates the third dimensional density of the materialization of that which you are playing on your records. So, which songs are playing on your records? Do you have the smash hits? Do you have the greatest hits? Or do you have the blues playing on your records? Which records are you broadcasting out to the grid matrix of collective consciousness, which in turn is helping to co-create your reality? I want to go to a quote, a piece from Rizwan Verk's book called The Simulation Hypothesis. He speaks about Stephen Hawking. Here we go. Stephen Hawking raises the point that his research into black holes brought up a disturbing aspect of information loss of particles that go into but do not come out of a black hole. Quoting Stephen Hawking, if determinism breaks down, we can't be sure of our past history either. So what does this mean? Blessings and welcome, everyone. What does this mean? Well, the determinist approach proposes that all behavior has a cause and is thus predictable, the past repeating itself. Free will is an illusion, and our behavior is governed by internal or external forces over which we have no control. So that's our 3D bind. Artem, blessings, brother. Sending you a big hug. So that's our 3D bind. That's the victim. That's the part of us playing out the stories that feel that we can't do anything about it, right? We are just a subject to whatever circumstances we are in this world, and we are in a bind. We are stuck in the 3D. We're stuck in the matrix. Determinism, the doctrine that all events, including human action, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will. Some philosophers have taken determinism to imply that individual human beings have no free will and cannot be held morally responsible for their actions. Right? We are a bundle of reactions and responses rooted in the memory of the past, rooted in the Akashic records. So we're going to come back over here. Back to that Stephen Hawking quote. If determinism, which is your inner matrix, your personal matrix, your file, the records that you're playing now from the Akashic in this grid matrix, if determinism, your inner matrix, breaks down, we cannot be sure of our past history either. So that's when we lose our identity. Have you ever had that happen to you? Who am I? Right? Who are you? And ultimately, we go along our healing path, and we have our breakdowns and our breakthroughs as we ascend. And who am I, ultimately, alchemates into I am that. I'll continue. Stephen Hawking, quote, "The history books and our memories could just be illusions." And we know there is no past, no future, and ultimately no present. There is only the now, when we get into the deeper aspect of these metaphysics. So all memories are illusion. The history books and our memories could just be illusions, Stephen Hawking says. Well, isn't it so, according to our consciousness studies, that there really is no past? It is the past, this is Stephen Hawking, it is the past that tells us who we are. Without it, we lose our identity. So when you forget who you are, when you forget the stories that you've been told by your family, your guardians, the world, this matrix at large, when you forget who you've been told that you are, you begin to remember that which you truly are. Have you had that experience? And I just want to say thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. According to determinism, everything in one's future has already been decided by the actions of their past. That's the Akashic memory, that's your records. You really don't choose your path by will at all, but by the stories you lay behind yourself. So imagine your life is an adventure story, right? The timeline that you're surfing now is a conglomeration of all of the stories of the past that you've said yes to, of all of the agreements that you've said yes to in this life. Your karmas, your gifts, your joys, your sorrows. Let's talk about timelines. Timelines are erased, created, and rearranged by way of resonance. You are the engineer. Memory keeps you bound to repetitive timeline structures. Memory resides in your etheric template. Now, we did a show on the etheric body a little while ago, right? And so the etheric body is what broadcasts the signals to the grid. That etheric template is where your records are playing, is where your records are grooved into this energy aura that you walk with. They pull from, right? Your etheric body is basically pulling from the Akashic records, imprinting from that etheric plane onto the etheric template that you are walking with, and then broadcasting them out through the grids, creating your reality. So again, memory resides in your etheric template, in your etheric body. And it is what broadcasts signals to the grid. It's the records you're playing from the Akashic that are stored in your etheric body. And those co-create your reality. So how do you change your reality? How do you change those timelines? How do you change? Right? You heal. You ascend. You do the work. You study. You self-reflect. You meditate. You do all those practices that your spirit guides you to, that you may know yourself on a deeper level. And I just want to say we did our first Akashic release and retrieval workshop on October 30th, and it was very powerful. I will be doing another one December 30th, which is a Wednesday night, 5:30 Pacific Standard Time. We go into the Akashic records, and you release the patterns that you know you are ready to release. You put those records back on the shelf in the Akashic hall, and you retrieve those memories that you have left for yourself in the past for this future you in the now. It's really powerful. So keep an eye out or sign up at my newsletter to stay in touch. There are links at my bio via the link tree. So there are ways, right? We heal our grievances. That's how we get over. those timelines. That's how we move into new timelines, new aspects of realities. You heal your grievances and your timelines shift. You become conscious where you had been unconscious and your timelines shift. You find yourself in a new fractal of the adventure story you are playing out. Have you ever found that? That as you heal, as you release, as you move from one paradigm of knowing yourself, of knowing your experience to the next, that everything changes. The pixelation of the simulation you are employing and receiving creates a reconsideration, creates a reconfiguration that you can live by, that you can know yourself through. Again, I want to say, if you're joining me, thank you so much. I'm using my old phone. There is an electricity outage in my neighborhood. I usually go live on Facebook and YouTube when I do not have a guest here on 4D Trinity. And I cannot do that today because I need the Wi-Fi. So I'm on my old phone here, which I use for phone calls. And it's old. So it has a tendency to relay video in a glitched way. So I'm doing my best to stay still. But there will be movement. So I'm just letting you know that. We're going to read from I Am the Word by Paul Selig. So speaking about karma, let's take a moment here because we've also been talking about karmas, right? And that's all we're doing here. And reliving those old patterns, those old memories and timelines. Is free will really free? Right? What is the cost of rerunning old toxic patterns, of rerunning those old records from the Akashic into your reality now? What is the cost of that? Is it really free? Is it serving you? What's the pay down for rerunning those records, for being the victim, for rerunning those realities through your timelines? There's a difference, living karma versus living dharma. Living karma is that continual rerunning of those patterns. It is the continual rerunning of those patterns. Living your dharma is living as one with God, source, love, and light. It is that realization that you are not those patterns, you are not this body, but you are God, you are that one, you are that singularity in that sense of coherent God, source realization. Divine patterns of perfection then are allowed to channel through you and create new realities. So reading, if you have a karmic lesson to learn in this lifetime, you can believe that that lesson will come to you in the way that is appropriate to you. So you know along your path of healing, when you really decide, really healing is ascension. And when you decide to begin to take those steps to heal your grievances with your mother, your father, your work, your job, your finances, your body, your health, your healing, whatever it might be, when you really sincerely devote yourself in that direction, what happens is you begin to resonate with that frequency and you draw to you those books, those teachers, those teachings that will serve you along your path of realization. And they will be specific to you. This text, he's saying this text in this book, but also I will add that all sacred texts, and really anything, any book you might pick up at any time and be guided to read, is the catalyst for your experience of your own divinity and the divinity of others. As you realize your divinity, you realize that you are one with all. And as you engage it, you have to remove the blocks that have kept you from this awareness that is ever present in truth. So as you become aware, as you begin to devote yourself to healing those grievances that have kept you a victim in the matrix, that have kept you bound to repeating a sense of the illusion of free will, which is really the repetitive patterns of past matrices rerunning from the Akashic through the grid, as you begin to dissolve and reconfigure your patterning, the way you see the past changes. As you engage in it, you have to remove the blocks that have kept you from this awareness that you are one. So as you engage it, you realize, like, oh shit, I gotta forgive mom. I gotta forgive dad. And once that is allowed, once your willingness is given the right of way, and you begin to release those old patterns and paradigms, what happens is you begin to have a new experience. Again, there's that new timeline. Those old frazzled, toxic patterns that kept you bound to rerunning a sense of free will, in fact, where you were rerunning the same will, begin to dissolve. And you begin to expand, and you have access to new aspects of yourself in the light of love, in the light of God. On a soul level, you know what you are. You know who you are, and you know who your brother is. Your brother and your sister are you. We are one. So you don't have to fear this, right? It's really terrifying sometimes to go in there and to forgive and to forget, because we've been hurt. We've been hurt by the world, by the matrix, by our parents, by teachers, by whoever it might be. There's pain there. And there's a fear that to release that pain, well, who am I going to be without it? There's almost a safety in being the victim. There's almost a safety in rerunning those patterns because it's what we know. But true liberation resides outside of those patterns, outside of that illusion of free will that is bound in the tick-tock of the binary system of the grid, of the matrix. All you are letting go of is that which vibrates at a lower frequency that you have outgrown. When you are guided to heal a part of your life, it is time. The vortex is open. It is time. All beings that are related to that aspect are also ready on several levels of their consciousness to also be liberated. You are shedding skins, and while that may be strange, it does not have to change your level of safety and agreement that you are in your world and you are moving forward in ways that are truthful to you. So the message, don't be afraid of rearranging your karma. Don't be afraid of living your Dharma. So let's go ahead and continue on. Blessings and thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to read from Walter Russell's book, The Secret of Life, and within Secret of Life, The Secret of Light. And within his book, he quotes many phrases and paragraphs from his other work, The Divine Iliad, which I'm going to read now. For I say that all things which floweth from life of me have life of me flowing through them. And he's speaking about God. This is God talking. Even to the last of these. So from you to the greatest galaxy to the smallest ant, there is God. But I say that even though my light of immortal life floweth through those mortal symbols, so that which is immortal is that which is, that is the God. That is the undeletable file that you are constantly in contact with, that sacred, divine unity, that coherence of God source realization. That is the immortal part of you. The mortal part of you is the body, is the personality, is the identity we think we are or that we play out in the stories here in the grid matrix. My light of immortal life floweth through those mortal symbols of my thinking. It toucheth them not in its passing. When they shall know the light of me in them, then they shall be me and I them. So there is that coherence, there is that unity, there is that divine that oneness, that realization that helps us to break through those patterns of thinking that we are who we have been told we are, of thinking we are the past, we are the memories. And I like to think about this. So that undeletable file, again, I'm going to move slow because I'm on this old phone and I know it gets glitchy when I move around a lot. As some of you know, I have been becoming quite beautifully amused and obsessed with the Rubik's Cube. I go online, I do a few lives. I've done about 3 or 4 at this point where I'm learning to solve the Rubik's Cube. And in my explorations, this was guided as a part of the screenplay that I'm writing, which is Grid Mind Science. And I'd like to thank everyone who is following Grid Mind Science at my other page. It's a screenplay I'm writing for a movie that wants to be created through me. And it was guided to investigate the Rubik's Cube, to go into it and to think about it, to explore it. So I purchased one, guided to purchase one and start playing with it. And in my discovery, I recognize this divine pattern that there are 6 colors on the Rubik's Cube, and on each side of the cube, there is a central square that is unchangeable. That central square, it is in the center of each side of the cube. That is that center square, that is that center space in the tiny space of our heart. That is the 0 point, that is that divine, sacred portal to God, to love, to light, to that divinity that is always within us. Now the cube may be mixed-matched, right? Our patterns may be mixed-matched. What we think, what we speak, how we explore our reality. And it is in the union of all of these aspects, that's the God phone, that we experience our unity. And with those words, hello, God. So that's our unity. Pardon me 1 second, God, to put God on hold for a moment. So we create then the Holy Grail hologram. The Holy Grail hologram is that template that is that center square. It is akin to that center square that is always present in the center of each side of the Rubik's Cube. And that's what we're doing. We are matching ourselves, mind, body, emotions, with that perfect template, with the Holy Grail hologram that walks with us, that is God. And here you are. Pardon me. God is ever patient. Yes, yes, God says, hello, everyone. I would love to read from A Course in Miracles today. We're talking about free will, indeed. The little willingness. I will do, God. God sends love to everyone. Thank you, dear God. Peace. Okay, so we are going to read a little bit from A Course in Miracles here shortly. I want to continue with this, though, and I just want to give props to Marianne Williamson because she's the one that I heard that phrase from years ago of the undeletable file. That God, that awareness, that reality, that with a capital R, that realization is that which is in us always, that undeletable file. No matter how much wine you drink, no matter how many drugs you take, no matter how many toxic relationships you have, no matter how much self-hate you have encouraged, God, that love, that Holy Grail hologram is unfuckable with, and it is always within you. So let's continue. Walter Russell. So when we connect with this now, when we set our alignments in that way of Dharma, in that way of matching all of those parts of ourselves, mind, body, and really the mind is what creates the emotions according to the teachings I share. When all of those sync up, that is when we have synchronicity. That is when we have the experience of happenstance, of flow, of divine alignments that are continual. And where does that space reside? It resides in no timeline. It resides in the now. And the now is a moment-to-moment experience. Walter Russell. Moment-by-moment companionship with God brings with it so great a realization of oneness with Him that the transformation into that full realization of unity is apt to take place at any time. Your full activation of God consciousness is always on the precipice. It is always, because it is always within you. It is the truth. It is always relative. It is always present. And again, I'm going to do my best to move slowly so we don't get glitchy. This is you. This is you. You are love. You are light. You are no thing of this world. Yet while we are in bodies in this third dimension, we are in the world. We are of the world to degrees. To the degree that we call on and pull up from the Akashic and create through this grid matrix the stories that we are playing out. So again, moment-by-moment companionship with God brings with it such a great realization of oneness. This full realization of unity is apt to take place at any time. Have you had those ahas where you have that full-on realization of all things being beautifully, divinely connected? The deterrent to cosmic consciousness is the feeling that God is far away instead of being within. Again, there's that victim consciousness. That's that free will that is bound to the loom of the matrix, bound to the loom of past, present, future aptitudes rooted in the Akashic records. And that we can reach that far away God. Let me start from the beginning. The deterrent to cosmic consciousness is the feeling that God is far away instead of being within. And that we can reach that far away God only through sources outside of ourselves. Again, it is within us, right? That God realization is constantly within us, always. Now let's read from A Course in Miracles that God had guided. And God guides this part here, the little willingness, page 380 from the text. Remember, we're speaking about free will, your willpower and willingness through all the dimensions. The holy instant is the result of your determination to be holy. It is a choice. You use your free will to either choose fear or love, and each of those tracks create a different timelines for you. They create a different railroad track system for you to experience your reality. The determination to be holy, it is the answer. The desire and willingness to let it come precede its coming. So even before you fully consciously said, yes, I will to will thy will, I will to will my will in the way of love, in the way of healing, in the way of self-acceptance, in the way of participating in this world, in my life, in this experience from a conscious level, that desire and the willingness to let that be, to let yourself be led by God, precede the reality with a capital R, precede its experience in your reality. You prepare your mind for it only to the extent of recognizing that you want it above all else. Now, you know, if you've really gotten into the hell realms, toxic addictions, partnerships, relationships, self-hate, whatever it might be, thank you for the love. Oh, blessings, intuitive spirit life. Blessings, sister. We know when we've gotten into those hell realms that we feel like a victim, right? And when it takes a certain determination, a certain decision to go to rehab, and to not only go to rehab, but to stay in rehab, to do the practices, or to eat that healthier diet. Maybe you're healing from cancer, and you've had a revelation that, changing your diet will help to create a different alkalinity, in your body, which helps your body to respond in different ways to your healing process. But is that determination that creates the proficiency of the experience that you will have, that will be a new experience from the past, will be a new now experience. It is not necessary that you do more. Indeed, it is necessary that you realize that you cannot do more. So the idea speaks to letting go and letting God. Letting go and letting God. Free will. Is it really free? Are the choices you're making now creating new paradigms for you to step from and to explore for your future? If the future is based on those stepping stones we create for ourselves now and from the past, right? Where are they leading you now? Are they down through paths that you would have your experience in? Are they pathways and timelines that you are in agreement with all of your heart? Do they match your Holy Grail hologram? Do they match your God consciousness, your joy, your health, your healing? Only you decide that. And it is your determination to decide otherwise that you would choose to heal, that you would choose to practice and exercise your experience here in the third dimension from that depth of your heart that gives rise to a new experience, which we call the fourth dimensional consciousness, the 4D. That is the tiny space in the heart. I want to show you this before we read on. Oh, blessings. Thank you for all the love here. Do you know the Merkabah? The Merkabah meditation. There are many forms of it. I've practiced for 20 years now the flower of life, the traditional, I will say, quote, the original flower of life meditation. Drunvalo Melchizedek, teaches it. And as a rudimentary part of our spiritual awakening, it trims the fat. As we learn to run our Merkabah and fly and activate this chariot of consciousness, these sacred geometries of self in this world, in this third dimension, we begin to realize our ability to hold love, to be love in this world by just allowing ourselves to be in that frequency of that Merkabah consciousness. This is where we begin to master the binary subset strata of this grid matrix of the yes, no, the right, wrong, the left, right, the good and bad, these binaries systems here. And it is here that we learn again how to hold the frequency of love by learning to fly around in that Merkabah. learning to be love in this world, to begin to learn how to be in this world and not be of the world. And as we begin to generate that capacity to be that Merkabah, to run our Merkabah, to fly around, to relax in the peacefulness that is our true nature, that love, we begin to enter the gateway of the Vajra, of the heart, again, that tiny space of the heart. And the geometries, as you see, go from that Merkabah shape, that Star of David shape, into the diamond shape. Now, these are teachings that have come to me that I share in the Grid Mind Science teachings, and they are quite profound. I have found them to be the way that this geometry works in our healing. So as we move from that really deep, sincere practice and devotion to saying, yes, I will walk in love, I will run my Merkabah, I will be love, we move into the Vajra, into the diamond. Those geometries of that Merkabah change shape and form and create that diamond. We begin to move into the heart. We begin to fear less this third dimension. Because remember, those two tetrahedrons spinning in opposite rotationary cycles that make up your Merkabah, they trim the fat. They run at cycles per second, depending on how you do your Merkabah. If it's the traditional, right? Ultimately, what we do is we're running those frequencies 9/10 the speed of light. And so you can imagine if one tetrahedron is cycling in one direction and the other in the other, boom, 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 that is releasing. That is completely releasing the fat of the fear. We move into the Vajra, into that diamond-shaped consciousness of the heart. And the geometries really start to change when we begin to consistently allow ourselves to retain and relax and allow ourselves to embody those frequencies of that heart consciousness. Then we start to move into Taurus consciousness. That is the trinary. That is where we are in the world and not of it, very consciously awakened from the heart center. When we trust enough mystically in the heart and we lean into it enough and we say, okay, God, source, love, light, you lead the way. I follow you. That's when everything changes. All of those timelines that you've been operating through and that have been operating through you, creating your reality in this simulation, that's when things begin to really change. You see through the veils of the matrix, you see through the veils of your own bullshit. Right? Let's get real. And you start to say, oh, where can I change this? What would I like to use my free will to change in this matrix? But what happens is we start to operate them from a place that is not only our own will, that is not bound to the Akashic, repeating those memories of the past, repeating those memories and broadcasting them through the grid matrix, through this third dimension. We begin to co-create with God, with source, with love, with light, which creates a whole different paradigm, that is the fourth dimensional consciousness, in the world not of it, heaven on earth. We are in the world not of it. We begin to exist and have experiences in this world that are not bound to this world, that do not keep us bound to this world. Blessings, 4D Fighting Arts. Much love to you, dear brother. Thank you for joining. Oh, Empro Strength. Nice to see you here. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you following at Booty Sculpt. Booty Sculptress. So we begin to operate from our Taurus consciousness. We begin to have more options because we're not bound to the binary subset system that is only yes and no, left and right, right and wrong. We begin to have access to that which is the other option, which is love and only love, which is the tiny space in our heart. That is that tiny space. If you think about the little flyer that I made for today's show, it is these two tetrahedrons or these two triangles pointing in towards each other, and there's a tiny space between them. And that is that tiny space in your heart. That is God's voice. That is the voice for God. That is heaven. That is that space, that portal, that sacred plane, that when we give it the right of way and with our own devotion, create that continual relationship with that sacred space, that God is allowed to channel through us. And we have a whole different reality and realization in this world. And we start to channel heaven on earth for ourselves. And we take heaven on earth wherever we go. And others can have that experience with us as well. So we go from Merkabah to Vajra Diamond to the Taurus field, to Taurus consciousness, that which is fourth dimensional consciousness. Now, next I'm going to read. I want to check the time. So again, if you're just joining, we have an electricity outage here in my neighborhood. So I'm on my old phone doing this recording, and it's a very old phone because it's the one that I use to speak on, so it has that free, data and whatnot. But it's ancient, this phone, so it can be glitchy if I move around a lot. So forgive me if there's glitches in my movements. I'm trying to be very still. If you know me, you know I love to wave arms and be very bravado when I speak. So I'm doing my best to stay statuesque. But with that, we are going to read here next from this wonderful book that I continue to go back to, really all of these books. It's channeled information. And what's her name? Elizabeth, where is she? You see, she's so humble, she's not even on the front. Okay, recorded. Okay, this is Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Now, she channels Saint Germain. And this book is Saint Germain on Alchemy, Formulas for Self-Transformation. So we are talking about free will. Is free will really free? If you've just hopped on now, this will be going up to the IGTV, so please come back and watch from the beginning if it is of interest to you. So I'm going to read here. Unfortunately, even in those periods of their most advanced meditations, mankind have seldom glimpsed the necessary cosmic pattern of what they are and what they shall be, right? So we can meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate. And, people meditate for years and years and they still can become frustrated and be like, I have not cracked the code. What is the code? We still are living out our memories, and it's all karmic and it's all divine, right? But when we realize that time is an illusion and we release, then we start to slip out of time and into the now. The secrets of alchemy are always to be found in the domain of creation. If man has not the power to create, he is not truly free. Therefore, the stream of energy that God is giving to him in ceaseless descent must needs be channeled into matrices of creative desire, patterned after the divine will. Divine will, different from your will, different from your personal will that keeps you rooted, the will of the past, the will that is the illusion of the past being broadcast again from the Akashic through you to the grid, creating your reality in the simulation, in this matrix. Where there is not divine will, all we're doing is repeating the illusion of having free will. And again, at what cost? What patterns are you repeating that are co-creating the continuation of toxic patterns? Of why is this happening to me? Of victim mentality. That is the third dimensional aspect of self. That is not us when we are free and liberated. It is our healing that gives rise to our liberation. That is what I profess. That is what I preach. And I pray it resonates with you. So again, therefore, the stream of energy that God is giving to him in ceaseless descent must needs be channeled into matrices of creative desire patterned after the divine will. So this is saying, go forth and pattern your divine alignments, your intentions, your desires with divine will, versus the idea of your own manipulative, and I don't mean that in a polarized way, but that's what we do, right? When we do vision boards and we do law of attraction stuff, is we're saying like, I want that, I want him, I want her, and I'm gonna make it happen, gosh darn it, and there's nothing wrong with that. We learn in my second book, How to Manifest with the Law of Vibration, we learn there is a difference. There's a difference between creating with only the mind and the emotions. If you go back and you do research, law of attraction is all based on using your mind and using your emotions. And your emotions are your mind. Your emotions are birthed from your mind. And what I teach is the emotions are not real. Your feelings are real. Your feelings are real. And what are feelings? There is only one feeling. This is what I profess. There is only one feeling, and that feeling is love. And that is what is real. Your emotions are not real. So unless these things are channeled, right, in alignment with divine will, these patterns will be misqualified. These energies form the links of the chain that binds him, that bind us. So these links in the chain are karma, are the timelines, are the grids that are rooted in the Akashic that keep rerunning. So unless we say, God, help me, angels, divine source, ascended masters, whoever your people are, your totems, whoever and whatever you pray to. Without that prayer, without that recognition and that calling in of that divine will, we are repeating those similar patterns in the guise of thinking we have free will. So karma, repetitive patterns. You learn to exercise and strengthen the musculature of your spiritual will. So when we do our work in the realms of spirit, in the realms of healing our lives, in the realms of ascension, we realize that there is a choice, again, between love and fear. That's all anything is the choice between love and fear. The love channel or the fear channel. And each of those channels, every time we choose, creates a different adventure story. Remember those adventure story books when you were little? Katie and Bobby, go to the cave, and you can go to chapter 1 or chapter 2 or page 83 or 84. And depending on which page you go through, there's a new timeline, there's a new adventure, there's a new part to the story that they will have rise to, that they will have access to. It's the same for us. That's our life. When we practice our spiritual will, we are choosing love. We are saying yes to God. We are saying yes to the voice for God within us. That is your higher self. That's your higher self. That's your intuition. That is your Holy Grail hologram resonating at its divine perfection and speaking to you frequentially through every cell and every atom of your being, directly from God. That's powerful. So when you exercise that spiritual will, now it's a muscle, because in some areas we might have an easier willingness to say yes to love, right? Everyone's like, oh, I'll say yes to money. Oh, yeah. I love money. Let's say yes to that, right? I'll use my spiritual will for that, sure. But when it comes to, healing aspects where you've been hurt or where there's pain or trauma or addiction or toxic patterns, how strong is your spiritual will? To allow yourself to align with that divine will that will help to create the new patterns that break you free from those old timelines, that ultimately create beautiful patterns of perfection that resonate as the now. I want to read this for you. So divine patterns of perfection come risen through us and resonate as that sacred geometry that reflects the phi, the pattern of that divine sacred geometry, the divine sequence of the sacred order of all creation. When we say yes to God, to love, to light, we give rise to that frequency through our thoughts, words, actions, and deeds. That is what creates through us, that we get out of the way and we allow that to channel through us. And by way of divine will, those patterns of perfection, those patterns of phi, are created for us, to us, and through us. And from that we create again by way of Dharma instead of by way of karma. By way of Dharma instead of by way of Dharma, instead of karma. And again, your Dharma, when you live your Dharma, you're living your purpose, your heart, your truth. And even if you don't know what your purpose is, as you continue aligning and devoting yourself to aligning with that divine will versus a sense of free will of the personality, the identity, the pain, the past, the memory, the Akashic, the grid. We use all these tools. They're not bad. But as we align with that which is beyond the tools, that which is ever present as God, source, love, light, right? Those new realities with the capital R begin to emerge. We make sacred space for them. When you live your Dharma, you stop creating patterns of karma. You stop creating those patterns that rerun those stories, those records, if you go back to the beginning of this show, that rerun those records that you're playing and broadcasting through your etheric body and template, that excite the grid matrix, that excite the atomic structure of this universe, and so create your reality in the simulation. Let's keep going. Thank you for joining, everyone. I'm so grateful. Oh, blessings. Thank you for that love. Oh, Semi Guad? Guad? You're so sweet. Blessings. Okay, remember, this is divine artistry of the highest type. It is also co-creation with God, and as such is best used by those whose purposes parallel the divine. Thus, when the will of man is aligned with the will of God, that's that divine will, the light of God does not fail to precipitate that will in fullness of time, space, and opportunity. Now, time and space are fractals, there are what I will say, time and space are aspects. They're tools of this third dimensional reality. In the grid mind science teaching, time is the energy that you create through the tip of your tongue, through the words you speak. You set in motion the atomic structures of this universe by your word. Space is created by the thoughts you think, the emanations of the thoughts that you think, those lines, those energy threads cast out from you, those grids cast out from you that connect with the greater grid of the collective, that help to co-create by way of resonance your experience. That's your space. So we are these bodies. We are in this third dimension. We're learning to co-create by way of God, by way of love, right? To create that heaven on earth, to be free, to be in the world and not of it. And when we create that sacred space for God, love, light, source to channel through, it moves through us. It comes into this matrix. It moves through it and it reassembles like that Rubik's Cube, all that is dysfunctional, and creates the blessed timeline that is out of time, that is the now, that is a moment-by-moment choice of us using our spiritual willpower, that voice for God saying, yes, what would Jesus do? What would your higher self do? And doing that, speaking that, saying that, thinking that, instead of what may be otherwise, that creates that pattern of perfection that matches the Holy Grail hologram that you walk with, that is represented in this Rubik's Cube by the center square on each side of it, that is undeletable, that is immovable, that is always centered station, the tiny space in your heart, the portal to God, the 0 point that is within you always. So when we make that sacred space, God can channel through this world. Divine intervention. Don't fear this world. Don't fear all this crazy that's happening, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever ist. Or you don't give a fuck ist. Which is really not having any mind about it. That's how I am. I don't have any mind about it. I mean, I think it's very interesting, and it's very, it's very interesting. It's very entertaining, this world. Blessings, Ancient Rosewater 11. Thank you for joining, love. Right? It's entertainment. But it is also a very real reality with a small r in this matrix that is playing out. And it has to do with all of our collective pasts as they interplay and intercede one another. Yet again, when we connect with God, source, love, light, we are given and we give the right of way to that higher in this dimension, because there is just consciousness, as I was sharing with 4D Fighting Arts at his podcast, 4D Thoughts podcast. We did a little interview the other week, and I'm really excited to share it with you soon, right? That in this dimension, there is a higher, there is a lower, there are all these different dimensions within this dimension of consciousness, but ultimately consciousness is, it is God. It is God. And so when we align word, thought, deed with that, we create that sacred space for that God to channel through us and create spontaneous healing, spontaneous realities with the capital R that is in the now. That is, how did that happen? How could that even happen? That is the miracle. That is the happenstance. That is the whoa. And that's the God. And we share it together. A prerequisite to applying the methods of precipitation is knowing what you want to precipitate. It was this truth with which Jesus taught in the Lord's Prayer, and when he said, "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." So we know there's a difference between our will and God's will. The will of God, the will of the higher, is the will of your real self. And in the book, real is with a capital R. The most important part of you. Because the lesser you, that's the self with the small s. Ooh, excuse me. Because the lesser you, although it retains through the soul the capacity to contact this higher self, because that's the undeletable file within you, the Holy Grail hologram, always present. It is but a bundle of impulses crowded with bits of human knowledge. That's all the past, that's all the patterns, that's all the stuff that we relay and recontinue to relay as experience here in the matrix that is rooted in the Akashic. Those are the memories, the patterns, the past, the karmas that we're working out now. I am advocating that you become acquainted with the reality, capital R, of yourself, capital S. For this reality is the genie, the genius in you, that can give Aladdin, symbolizing the alchemist who rubs the lamp of pure knowledge, the right desires of his immortal being. And we know a lot of these texts have a root in hymn, speaking of God as a hymn, or speaking as us as a hymn, or a brotherhood. So let's just be okay and get over that and know that that's just an ancient form of conveying the collective soul that we are one. Okay. So again, this is our 0 point, the free will. Now, when we align with divine will, I want to check the time. When we align with divine will, again, we are moving ourselves out of time. We are saying yes to the now, to that sacred happenstance, that sacred space. And what happens is ultimately when we continue to give rise to that Taurus consciousness, to that fourth dimensional consciousness of the tiny space, praise God, absolutely. Hey, blessings, Royal Curves, to that sacred space and that heart that is the oneness that is all of us. We begin to operate in a different reality here, right? We begin to have a different divine experience. There's a divine intercession which comes into play. And everyone's running around with like chickens without a head, screaming and freaking out. And you're going like, what are you talking about? Everything is actually perfect. Don't you see the divine? Don't you see? Remember Mr. Rogers, right? When he said when the riots were breaking out in his neighborhood and he was a little kid and he said, Mama, Mama. He's looking out the window and people are pillaging and freaking out and busting windows. And his mom said, honey, look for the helpers. Look for the good. There is always good. And it is our ability to see it with our vision, our third eye and our heart in alignment, that divine alignment with the physical eyes that give rise to that perfection. It is that metaphysical process of us choosing to see the good over the bad. That's all the matrix. That's all binary. That's all polarity. Good, bad, right, wrong, left, right. Yes, no. That's all the limiting structures of this matrix and what we've been taught. But as we learn to see the good through it, that's the love and only love. That's the trinary vision. Not just using the physical eyes to see, but to use the third eye and the heart in conjunction to see notifications on my phone to say no, thank you, to incoming calls, but somehow a call got through, so pardon that pause. And what I was saying is that divine alignment from the third eye and the heart, that is our vision of, that sees on the vertical, and the physical eyes see on the horizon of the third dimension. Okay? So when we align that vision and we see through the veils of illusion, that is when we bring forth into this reality with the small r, the template of the reality with the capital R, the love. Oh, and what I wanted to say with that, so when we sustain that Taurus, when we sustain not just the Merkabah, but move into Taurus consciousness, into love and only love, that is when we stop seeing. So when we give rise and allow our vision to be God's vision, when we say, God, use my eyes, see through me, I want to see love. Help me see love in and amongst this matrix of craziness. What happens is you start to see with the eyes of God, with the third eye in the heart. And you, who you think you are, stop seeing. And when you stop seeing, the you who you think you are, when you stop seeing, God sees, and that collapses the observer effect. You no longer, right? The observer effect states that whatever you look at, however you look at it, changes it. And if we're looking at, with our free will, in this third dimensional, that limited free will, that idea of free will, if we're looking at things from those limited patterns and structures that are rooted and based on the past, which is illusion, which is memory, then we're recreating the past over and over again. We're just rerunning the wheel, the karmas. But when we are not looking and God is looking through us, we look with that holy vision. The observer effect has no effect. And we see God, we see love, we see light. We allow it its space in this matrix. The matrix is transformed through us. So we're going to finish up here now. A prerequisite to applying the methods of precipitation is knowing what you want to precipitate. I think, did I already read this? Oh, shoot, I already read this. Here we go. Okay, I pray we have time. Only by this form we do. Only by this form of devotion shall their hearts, touched by the hands of the infinite Creator, be imbued with such reality and love that they will move with precision to execute the divine will. So when you say, yes, God, and God says, okay. When you say, use me, God, and God says, okay, God will use you. And the divine timing and alignment of all that you do, say, think, and will through that divine will have its perfect place in all time, space, and dimensions in this third dimensional reality, creating heaven on earth. Thus shall men behold the outworkings of a providence that has for so long yearned to find greater expression in mortal affairs, that those affairs might become truly guided by the power of life with a capital L from on high. So that which is birthed by and through God extends in perfect phi, again, that perfect phi, creating sacred geometries, that perfect pattern, the golden mean, the structure of those divine alignments. And it is such that that right of way is given, that heaven on earth may be here for you and for me. And so it is. I'm so grateful for your presence today. May everything I share, or even just a tiny little nugget of it, inspire an awakening of love within you. I'm so very grateful for this platform. I am Tuesday Mae Thomas. This is my weekly live stream, 4D Trinity. I will be here next week with a guest. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I pray, Ray. I don't think he's here right now on the live. Hey, kindred soul sister, but Ray should be here. Should, would, could, will, hopefully, we'll see. I don't like hope. Maybe here. If it's divinely aligned. And we're going to be talking about the simulation, about the matrix, about the mystical aspects of 3, 6, and 9 of those divine numbers and how they help to co-create that divine expression through us and to us. Blessings, mystic artifacts. So I'm excited for that. We'll see how that manifests for us. Again, if you're new to me, go to my bio, sign up for my monthly love letter. I will be sending one out. Blessings, Vajra Queen. Thank you for being here. I will be sending one out soon by the end of the month. And I thank you for following all of my platforms, Grid Mind Science, here, Tuesday Mae Thomas, and all the other goodies that I have to share. So again, thank you. If you just hopped on at the end, please go back, watch from the beginning. I'll be putting this up at IGTV. So blessings for a beautiful day. Namaste, everyone.